In animation, the keyframes are the points on the timeline at which all the important changes occur. And by setting the keyframes on each important moment in time, you determine how your object moves, rotates, scales, or performs any other animated task you require of it. Now, a few things I want to change before I start introducing the keyframing itself. First of all, we go to the playback speed. I want to make sure this is set to real time. If I set this to play every frame free, it will play it as fast as it possibly can. It will not play at the same speed that I needed to in the end. Next, I'm going to go to Windows, Settings/Preferences, Time Slider. And right now the frame rate is 24 frames per second. That's it by default. I tend to change this to 30 frames per second. The animation tends to be more like 29.97, something like that. But 30 frames per second makes for much easier math than either of the other options. That means that every 30 frames down here, 1 second of time will pass. So if I want to say keyframe this sphere moving around my grid, taking 1 second to get to every corner, I can keyframe it 30 frames between each corner. Now, first things first, I need to give it a beginning frame to start to mark where it starts from. So I'm going to go over here to the translates. I'm going to highlight them, right-click, and key selected. And these little red marks mean that these numbers are keyframed. If you look at my timeline, on frame 0, there's a red line that is also a keyframe. Now, a mistake a lot of people make when they're new to this is their first instinct is to move the object and then change the time to 30 frames. But you can see what happens if I do that is it jumps back to my original position. If I drag my frame down here in my timeline, it will always set this to be last keyframe position. So no matter where I put this, it'll always jump back to this keyframe right here. Unless I have a second keyframe in here, it does not know where else this needs to go. So I always need to change my time first. Then click on frame 30 right here. And now I can move my sphere. And I can right-click, key select it again. When I move to the next corner, go to frame 60, move it. And if I want to, instead of having to right-click, they translate right here and select keyframe. Remember, the first 4 keys on the QWERTY keyboard are Q, W, E, and R, right? Q for select, W for move, E for rotate, and R for scale. If I hit W, go back to my move tool, I can move it around. Or I can hold down Shift, W, and that will keyframe my translates. Shift E will keyframe rotate, Shift R will keyframe scale. I can move on to the next keyframe I want, move it into the next position. And I could hit, key selected. I can hit Shift W on my keyboard, or I can hit S, and S will keyframe everything in my channel box. And now all of these are keyframed. But if I do that, I usually want to go back and clean this up because I don't necessarily want to have keyframes for things that aren't doing anything. So if I only want a keyframe rotation, I will only use Shift E. If I only want a keyframe scale, I'll only hit Shift R. If I only want to keyframe translates, I will only hit Shift W. If I want to keyframe everything, if it's going to be moving, rotating, and scaling, then I'll use S. And if I have a bunch of keyframes I don't want, I can select them, right-click, and go down here to where it says Break Connection. And now it breaks the keyframes off of these other channels. Now, for the very last one, I want this to go back to the original position. So another thing I can do, I can go back to my initial keyframe right here, 0, right-click, and copy that keyframe. I'll grab all the information in here, go to frame 120, right-click, paste, and there's two different options for paste. I just use the first one, and now it's pasted my original keyframe. So you can see what happens if I drag back and forth between the different keyframes. You can see it blends between them. And if I play over here, just like that. Other buttons in here. This plays backwards, in case you want to watch it play backwards. Stop that. The arrows that point into a red line, that just means go to the next keyframe in that direction, either forwards or backwards. This one just lets it go one frame forward at a time, in case you need it, or backwards. And this takes you to the end of the currently visible timeline. This takes the beginning of the currently visible timeline. This over here tells you which frame you're currently looking at. Down here, this shows you the first frame in the currently available timeline. This shows you the last one. Or you could zoom in on a specific time within that timeline. Scroll this back and forth. Stretch it out. And you can always change this. I can change that to 600 if I wanted more frames, and then stretch this out to see all of them. Or I could bring this back in to say 300. You can also change your frame rate over here, 30 frames per second. Now, if I wanted to, I could adjust the positioning of these keyframes rather than going with my initial settings. I hold down Shift and drag whatever's inside of this selection right here. I can now move it left and right. Now if I hit play, it'll go 1 second for that one, 1 second for that one, 1 second for that one, and then a little slower for that one. How many seconds was that? Well, let me make that a full 2 seconds. Stop that. Shift, drag over. There. Now it'll be 2 seconds. Press play. And now that one's twice as long. I could also hold Shift, drag over a bunch of these, and pull them to the left. Now this one is only be 10 frames. That's 1/3 of a second. So that one will be much, much faster now. 1 second, a third of a second. I could also hold Shift, drag over all of them, grab the end, and just stretch it out. And that is the basics of keyframing.